I was on a tube at midnight, and I was kind of getting like just Raskolnikov vibes from Crime and Punishment from some of these guys, because I was pretty vulnerable. I was drunk, and people were kind of looking at me. I didn't like the way people were looking at me.
For those who don't know, including myself, what do you mean by Raskolnikov vibes? Because obviously I know the name and I know the book, but I haven't read it.
I'll go into it.
Okay.
But so essentially, I'm on this train. I'm drunk. I'm with a girl, and these guys are looking at the girl I'm with's ass, and it's like I kind of feel like I have to stare them down. It's not good, right? I'm around some people that are not good guys, and I think I am just kind of observing this spirit that has possessed people from acts of evil. And so when I kind of conceptualize what we're talking about with a villain journey, I think the villain journey is a cycle where you commit an evil act, you get away with it, and then the more you do that, the more your soul decays, and the more you metaphysically carry punishment around with you. So you kind of, I was seeing these characters that have violated moral law potentially, then they get away with it, and then your behavior towards others kind of gets cold as a result of that getting away with it. And that's what I think this cycle is. And I don't think I'm speculating too much when I'm seeing this shadow and animal sort of behavior rubbing off of guys in my tube experience. And what Dostoyevsky sort of speaks about with Raskolnikov is Raskolnikov kind of like tries to justify his immorality, and as a result, when he gets away with it, and as a result, his identity becomes bleak. He becomes a very anxious person. He kind of self-sabotages himself socially. He has a really bad relationship with his mother's and his sister, and he kind of sees his relationships with people as a burden. And it kind of, I kind of hinted at this villain journey here being a cycle of specifically getting away with something evil and then doing something more evil as a result, because you've got away with it before and your character is even more decayed. And I think I applied Raskolnikov because he's a very good example of getting away with something. That's essentially Dostoyevsky's message, is getting away with something is worse than getting punished, because at least when you get punished, your character has then time to reflect and you have time to change. When you don't get punished, then your character decays and it gets worse.
And is there even such thing as getting away with it when it comes to acts that breach moral laws? I mean, like, I think that book is about he murders someone, right? And no one finds out and he lives with that burden. That doesn't mean he got away with it. That means nobody knows he did it. But the psychological hell that he goes into in the book just shows you don't get away with it. Like, no one gets away with anything because you have to sit with yourself all the time. I do want to read that book, though. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what people don't think about when they're committing evil. They don't think about how it's going to harm their character or turn them more satanic. And all I'm trying to say with my London experience is that's the vibe that I got with people have committed some kind of evil act and then have gotten away with it, and as a result, their energy's very off to me. That's just what I observed. So yeah, I'll let you talk.
I like this, right? Because firstly, we're going to build on a concept we talked about in a previous episode, which I think is good, and shows that it's a deep idea and there's a lot of value to it. Secondly, I like that you've got this sort of anecdotal evidence of things that your gut has sort of picked up, and I'm now going to try and bring in a model based on a book that I haven't read, but I read the sort of summary of the key ideas that kind of puts it all together. So I guess to set the scene a little bit more, if people want to listen to the previous Jacob and Joel episode before this one, we were trying to figure out more on this problem of evil and why people do evil things and how we define evil. And so firstly, I want to separate evil people and people doing evil things, because I don't think evil people exist. I think there is a moral law to what it means to be a good human, and this is what sort of faith systems point to, and people breach that moral law. And becoming a villain or going through this villain's journey that I'm about to lay out is purely just when people breach that moral law. It doesn't make them an evil person, it means they're going down an evil path. And as you'll see in the model, they can either recover themselves or they go further and further down into the depths of hell. And I think your your observation about the cyclical structure of things will become apparent as I go into this. So, firstly, I think the villain's journey is the exact opposite to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which we've talked a lot about. The hero's journey is like a framework to view life, where if you act it out and follow its principles, it will lead you to the good life. Not just a life of pleasure and hedonism, but a good life where you develop character and you take on obstacles and you bring back value for your community and you gain wisdom in yourself and all those kind of higher virtues and values, right? And sitting at the opposite of that hero's journey is this villain's journey, which is a guaranteed framework. If you act it out in your life, it leads to the bad. It leads to immorality and pain and harm to oneself and others, etc., etc. Now, to go back to something we use a lot as an analogy, the study with the rats on the spring and measuring the force if it like smelt cheese in front of it, and then measuring the force if it smelt a cat behind it, and then measuring the force if it smelt a cat behind it and cheese in front of it. The hero's journey you can think about as, I don't know, philosophical cheese that one should be chasing, a positive framework to view life, whereas the villain's journey is the smell of the cat behind you. And I think anyone listening to this, any person in the world, should have an understanding of both of these things to know what they should be chasing and what they should be running away from. And the villain's journey is a life framework that we should be running away from. Now, the model I'm going to use comes from a lady called Valerie Estelle Frankel, and she wrote a book about villains in literature. Basically, it's kind of like a Joseph Campbell-esque book about modeling what the villain's arc is in stories and using a bunch of stories from pop culture and history and mythology to outline her points. I mean, she used a lot of characters that people would know, like Severus Snape, for example, and like Darth Vader from Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. And she kind of used the same cyclical model as Joseph Campbell, where there was 3 key stages of the villain's journey, and these are the points we're going to focus on. So it starts with the villain experiences estrangement from the community that leaves an emotional wound. So that could be a lack of love from parents or a guardian figure that estranges them from that fundamental community of parent and infant. That could be bullied at school, or never quite having friends, being socially isolated, being ostracized in the community. That isolation, it begins that sort of sense of resentment and pain, and emotional pain, leaving that emotional wound. Then secondly, and this is when they sort of go into that villain unknown world, right? They go on the villain's adventure, to sort of invert Joseph Campbell's term. They go through a series of trials where the self is prioritized over the community, right? Betrayal and cruelty is chosen over friendship and heroism. They choose to damage others for personal gain, and that potentially is fueled by the emotional wound. And that's the longest stage, right? But then when they come to the end of that particular villain cycle, 2 things happen. Right? Well, one of 2 things happen. They're either defeated by the hero, which we see in many great, popular stories, like, Harry Potter killing Voldemort, etc., etc., or they experience self-mastery and redemption and begin the path to be good and become an anti-hero. Severus Snape is a great example of this in his villain arc, that when he dies, we realize he was actually the good guy, and his whole arc changes and he becomes an anti-hero. Not to spoil Harry Potter for anyone who's not seen it, but I just did. And these are some extra points that I added. I don't know if Valerie Frankel put this in her book, but I think the model becomes cyclical because when the villain becomes defeated by the hero, that creates further estrangement from the community and further emotional wounds. If you think about it, a lot of stories, when the villain is defeated by the hero, the community laughs at the villain. They become a laughingstock. They become further and further rejected. And then this hellish cycle can therefore only end when the villain becomes an anti-hero and enters a stage of redemption and tries to be a good guy. And then final point before I open back to you again is, I think also perhaps at the end of each villain cycle, the individual has a choice to become good, this self-redemption. And it brings me back to Alex Hormozy's quote about the main difference between a hero and a villain is how they use their pain. A hero alchemizes pain to bring good into the world, whereas a villain wants others to feel pain because they've felt pain. So that emotional wound that is still with them, at the end of the cycle, they can either choose to change it and make a force of good, or continue down this like cycle into further and further and greater depths of hell.